West of the Rockies. Hello.
How can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines, radios, throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We're fighting for our lives. We must survive here.
1,000 air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is February the 8th, 2024. This is episode 423 of Workshop Radio. How are all of my fellow delinquents out there, down under and down over? Good to see all of you. We're going to open up with a rule to live by. We put it into the old spinning machine to see which random one would come out this week. And we've got rule number 9. And that is problems always seem the worst the first time you handle them. This has been something I've tried to share with my girls over the years. It's something that Becky and I learned way too difficultly back when we were first married, and it was simple. When you're young or when you're learning something new, problems always seem the most overwhelming. Now, that doesn't mean by knowing that it's going to make it easier, but what it does is hopefully it sits in the back of your brain and you think, okay, this is the first time I've ever dealt with something like this. Use home maintenance, for instance. How about the very first time you've ever had to unplug a stuck toilet? That would really be bad. Yes, I absolutely know it would be, but it is what it is. Now, if you approach that and you think, okay, this is a really shitty situation, I've never dealt with it before, where do I go with it? Well, you end up just dealing with it. The problem is that the newness of it brings on this incredible anxiety. And if you can embrace that, and I find as you get older, when you know about that anxiety, it's still going to hurt, but it's not quite as bad. You can tell yourself, hey, I've been here before. So for my kids, the first time that they get, say, they're behind on their bills, say they're behind on their phone bill, and they get something in the mail. Well, that might feel like the end of the world to them at that exact moment, because it does. You're scared to death. You're like, I don't know how to fix it. And guess what? The cool thing about life is eventually you figure out as you go along, number one, how not to create those problems. But when those problems come up, you're still going to be the person who can figure it out. So problems always seem the worst the first time you have to deal with them. But the sooner you know that, the sooner you implant that into the back of the old brainstem, the better off you're going to be figuring out how to solve problems in the future. All right. So I hope everybody's been good. We've got a good crowd in here already this evening. We got a great show, great lineup for you. We got this week in prepping once again. We got a ton of good stuff. We're going to jump in with the precious metals report. I haven't come up with a better name. If anybody out there can come up with, actually, let's do this. Whoever can come up with the most ingenious name for the precious metal segment each week, I will send you a pre-1964 Canadian dime in the mail. So you'll get some silver out of it. It's, it'd be something fun. So whoever can come up with it, you can send it to me anywhere you want, in the comments, whatever. But I would love for it to, fit in with some of the other names. Sorry. So let's bring up give me one moment here, folks, and we will share. Okay. So very first one, it seems like each week I do something about precious metals. Whatever I touch on ends up getting inspired for the next week. So last week we talked about precious metals. How will they survive in a fire? And that spurred me on to think, well, how do we choose a proper safe for home precious metal storage? So I did some digging and I found this article by Gold Survival Guide, and it's out of New Zealand. So it's very, very close to our good friend Ellen Kerr from Down Under. Good to see you in here again tonight, Ellen. And we got Byron, we got Digger, we got John Palmer, and quite a few others in here. So it's good to see you. So buying a home safe for gold and silver storage. I like this. They give you 8 questions you can ask. Not all of them are pertinent to us as preparedness-minded folk. But the first one is, why can't I just use a small safe to store my gold and silver? And if you were to look down in the basement here, there'd be a safe that isn't much bigger than that. And I guess I get a little verbal slap here because I'm probably not following what I should. But right here it says, a small safe will have thin walls made of low-grade steel and will offer very little protection from attack, often referred to as a tin box. Here's the deal. Beyond that, you ever see those crackheads that back into convenience stores in the middle of the night and they hook a chain up to an ATM and they pull it off and just drag it down the road? Well, some rather ingenious crackheads wouldn't even need to do that to one of these safes. These are, even if you had it full of silver, never be intimidated. Let's back up here a little bit. The ingenuity of crackheads will blow you out of the water. And I'm going to bet that most of them are going to just pick one of those up and run right out with it. They're not even going to bother trying to cut it open. You could with a little chisel or, a $35 Harbor Freight cordless grinder. Any of that would work. But honestly, one of these tiny ones, somebody's just going to pick it up and run out the door. All right. So what do we need? Well, we need a big, heavy safe. We know that, or in theory, especially if you're getting into any amount of precious metals. All right. How about number 3 right here? How can I discreetly install my safe? While installing a safe into an existing wall may not be possible, there's various other methods of keeping it safe. Now, if you go back further, they talk about how, those hidden safes in the wall aren't real safe. Again, man, we're going to use the word safe a lot because they're just too tiny. Knock them out, run away with them. This one here is pretty good. Disguise your safe. Perhaps some furniture will go over it or cover it with a blanket. That reminds me of an old Seinfeld intro many years ago. He used to talk about the safety and security of covering something with a jacket. He was talking about he called a big screen television. It was probably 27-inch at the time. And he parked, of course, in downtown New York. And he's like, I just threw a jacket over the TV. Nobody could see it. So I'm just saying, a great big safe, cover it with a blanket. I don't think it's honestly that great of an idea. Out of sight, out of mind. Don't advertise that you have a safe. I like that better. Again, we'll go back to one of those things that I learned from Stephen Harris many years ago. Security by obscurity. One of those things. If you want to keep things, the best way to keep things secure is the ne'er-do-wells not knowing about them whatsoever. I like that. That's even better. Now, this is a really good tip. I highlighted this. I wanted to share it with you. And if you guys have heard it or done something, throw it in the comments. I'd love to see it. Underneath the stairwell can be a great place. Take the door and the surrounding trim off, install the safe, and replace the surrounding trim and the door. This will take some serious time to remove as well as being difficult to locate. Again, when we go back to our favorite crack heads, anytime you make things more difficult for them, they're more likely to go somewhere else. Again, if you've got a big generator in the backyard and you use big ass chain, well, they're way less likely to run off with them, right? They're going to take the path of least resistance. The law of physics and the law of meth heads, they're about the same, right? But I like that. Tear off all the trim, or even better yet, how about you build a wall around the safe? I like that a lot too. How about this? We talked about this last week. Number 4, do I need an attack resistant or fire rating to protect my gold and silver? Well, just like everywhere, this is a good rule of thumb, and we're probably going to repeat it a bunch over time. But for storage of gold and silver, consider attack resistance first and fire rating secondary. But it's a bonus if you can get it. So don't worry so much about fire. Worry more about the ne'er-do-wells, right? There you go. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. We got some comments from last week's episode we'll deal with down the road. That safe right there, that little Sentry safe, I've got an old style dial one. And yeah. Number 6, what is the cash rating on a safe? I learned something new. You folks are going to learn something new. Some of you are anyway tonight. Didn't know this existed. Now, again, OPSEC, operational security. This may or may not be something you're worried about. I kind of like the idea because I'm a big believer in having insurance for as many things as I can, as long as it makes financial sense. I'm okay with an insurance company knowing I have precious metals if it's going to cover my ass if something happens. Simple as that. So what's a cash rating? It's for insurance purposes. It refers to the level of cover that a particular safe is rated for in terms of cash contents. When buying a home safe for gold or silver, genuinely this value is the same as for cash. To achieve this, the insurer will require a certified safe, for example, a CEN standard or an ASNZS standard. The harder it is to break into, the longer it takes, the higher the rating. So I don't know what all's involved in this process, but I'm sure it's involving contacting your insurance company, but also take a minute, look at your safe rating and find out, hey, if this is something I'm going to be worried about, it might be worth talking to insurance. Just have the conversation. You can have a hypothetical conversation. You can be like, hey, if I possibly had $3 worth of silver in a safe downstairs, is it possible to insure it? Simple as that, right? There you go. All right. Number 8, can I just buy a secondhand safe online to store some gold and silver? This is an area that I kind of disagree with this article. I'm a big fan of buying secondhand stuff, especially things like safes. If they're still kicking around and they've been around a long time, they were probably built like a brick shithouse, and the older ones tended to be heavier. We had a floor model safe at Home Hardware that basically took 8 guys to get it out of the building when we finally swapped out for a new one. And the new one was piddly compared to it. But here's what Gold Survival Guide says. With a secondhand safe, you don't know its life and its history. How's it been treated? Has it ever been breached? Has it been serviced regularly or at all? I get that totally. Now, have there also been instances? They said there's been instances where people have bought a secondhand safe online, ended up not getting the combination and having to pay $1,500 to get a technician to access it. Well, here's a story. I got the safe that I have right now for free from a local organization that's like, we lost the combination. If you want it, you can have it. Becky, she's really good at saying, hey, jump on that, hun, go get it. So what did I do? I went and got it. I contacted the company. It cost me somewhere in the $60 to $70 range. I ended up getting keys and the combination for it. So I got a $300 or $400 safe for a little bit of time and a little bit of money. So yeah, I like this. I would love to hear people's theoretical experiences with safes in the past to see what you guys think. But this kind of segment just keeps building on to the next one. By doing this article today, I was already inspired to come up with something for next week. So we'll deal with it. But anyway, let's take a look at what the delinquents had to say in the community feedback here, because everybody had some good thoughts while we were going on. And I want to shout out to Cold War Prepper. He's been a former guest and a friend of the workshop. He's in here this evening. Good to have you. John Palmer says the solution is to not have anything valuable. Ellen says, I keep my precious metals in my gun safe. Good luck picking 200 kilograms up and getting it out the door. And for my anyway, in freedom units, that's 440 pounds. John Palmer says to build a room as a safe. I like that a lot. And we're going to shout out to Ed Celio. Good to see you. And he said, hey, Tim, after he says, I can say, I'm not quite sure what that, after a misspent youth, I can say your property only needs to be more secure than your neighbors. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate that. And you're right. Just do more than, my own fault. The time I left my garage door open, and again, a crackhead, I know, I love that word, ran off with my generator. That's almost my fault. I literally left the garage door open. So there you go. Ellen Kerr says, or if your house looks like a Hell's Angels clubhouse, people would stay away from that too. It's like the old story of, if there's a single lady living in a house, go get the biggest, baddest pair of work boots you can get them all muddy and leave them just outside the door. Sometimes that deterrent is all you need. So that wraps up precious metals for this week. Let's move on to our friend of the workshop and our roving reporter that is all smiles all the time. That is Willow, Sunshine Prepper. The first thing I want to tell you is she's gone from 0 to 21 subscribers in 3 weeks. She's doing awesome. But what I really want is to give her some support and go over there and subscribe. Her video, all the links of every article we talk about tonight is in the description. So give her some love. So tonight she's going to talk about the horse manure protest. Now, the farmers getting pissed off over in Europe. So let's give her a listen. It's a great, I would say this is her best submission yet. And her first 3 were awesome. So with that, Let's see what Willow has to say.
Hello, and welcome to today's Sunshine Prepper News. I'm Willow, the Sunshine Prepper, here to spread a bit of positivity on the unavoidable doom and gloom. Take a nice, big, deep breath and sigh with me real quick before we hop into today's topic. Bonus points if you straighten your spine while you do it. Whew, okay, let's get into today's topic. It's going to be farmer protests ramping up and spreading in Europe. I remember when it was just the Netherlands. They started protesting in 2019, and then their last major protest was in March, right before their elections, and their work has finally resulted in some political change. Perhaps this has helped inspire farmers in other countries to rise up against policy changes that cripple farmers in pursuit of arbitrary goals to fix climate change. Policies that arguably really are just going to impoverish people and consolidate control of the food supply into the hands of our wannabe overlords. So, while the Netherlands might be done protesting, the torch has been passed to Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. Between them all, I think I've got to give a round of applause to the French farmers for their effective use of manure on government buildings and possibly also politicians' homes. I think it's just public buildings, though. They're also blocking roads with piles of tires and piles of dirt and really making sure that the government knows how they feel about this green agenda. But don't count out the Italians, who seem to have started the new trend of blockading airports with tractors. In Germany, the farmers have inspired other blue-collar workers to unite with them to block major roads. And in Spain, impressive numbers, often in the hundreds of tractors, are blocking ports and roads and burning piles of tires. But why? Why are all these hardworking farmers spending their valuable time, fuel, and equipment making a royal ruckus for their governments? Well, as I briefly mentioned, it all comes down to the Green Deal / Green Agenda in the EU, where they have goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 from the 1990 levels. Kind of wild. And they want to become climate neutral by 2050, which arguably is impossible, but we'll not go there. Different countries in the EU are approaching this in slightly different ways, like focusing specifically on reducing carbon or making their fight be with nitrogen. And using Germany as an example, they botched their budget around the pandemic stuff and are trying to fix said budget by dropping funding that supports agriculture. Farmers are particularly frustrated about Germany trying to remove agricultural use diesel subsidies. The idea behind the subsidy is that taxes on fuel are supposed to maintain roads, but farmers are driving on their property, not on the road, so they get a tax break on their fuel. But no. So in general, I don't think government subsidies are great. They often incentivize monocropping and other not great results in food production. But I don't think it's a bad idea to support the people busting their buns, doing actual hard work to grow food. So what can you and I do about any of this? Drum roll. I say, get your giggity garden going for 2024. For those of us outside of the EU, we can really only vigilantly watch our fellow average people in their struggle against tyranny. However, growing any amount of your own food is a seditious act within your circle of influence. While it may seem too early, you'd be surprised how many seeds are happy to get started indoors in February. If you have not had awesome success starting seeds like me, then now is the time to start planning out the space you have to buy plants. Together, we can resist the overlord's agenda with victory gardens. I hope you enjoyed today's segment. Wishing you and your family long life, prosperity, and success. Willow the Sunshine Prepper out.
Well, you guys, I got to say, it's pretty interesting. So I put a lot of this show kind of comes together throughout the week. And whenever I see an interesting article, I kind of bookmark it and I add it to where I think we're going to go this week. And this is the second time now that Willow has come in with something that is kind of a lead into another topic that I want to talk about. And that is simply some of these arduous or draconian measures that governments are passing in the guise of climate change protection, whatever you want to call it. And I love that she took the time to share this because I always crack up at the Europeans' I guess, insatiable lust for protesting. And of course, also their interesting methods that they love. The fact that they're, spraying cow shit everywhere. And oh man, it's hilarious. Now, here's the thing, guys. I seen an interview with Jordan Peterson the other day, and he goes, you know what? The easiest way that I had people to stop protesting at my events, I just started holding them in the morning, and the folks that were going to protest just didn't bother showing up. Now, this is kind of the opposite of that. How bad have you had to screw up as a government to cause farmers to spend 1 penny more than they need to come out and protest against you? How about, farmers are typically busy as all get out, dealing with crops and animals and the whole works. Also, I've never met a farmer in my life who isn't cheap, who basically has to be held to the fire to spend an extra penny. Can you imagine the fuel it takes to bring those massive tractors to the city and to protest the way they are? When you are pissing off the folks that make your food for you, heaven help you. Shouldn't you have learned years ago that if you piss off a worker at McDonald's, there's a good chance they're going to spit in your food? And if you piss off a farmer and they decide to stop growing, heaven help all of us. Anyway, let's move on to Stranger Than Fiction, folks. And this is a good one. We got So first story I got for you this week leads right in from the one that Willow just talked about. And this was 100% a request from Chris Dixon last week. I was talking about, I try to pick 3 stories, and I'm going to try to be a little more solutions based as I do this. I realized that the first few weeks, I just kind of talked about the story and didn't really delve into how does it affect us as preppers and what can we do to make our lives better in spite of this bullshit that goes on in the world, right? So here's the one. This is the University of Michigan study finds most urban farms have greater carbon footprints than conventional agriculture. So we're going to dive into this a little bit. I have the study. I may do a deeper dive into it later on, but I want to talk about this. This is from the Michigan Daily. And this was one that I guess Jack Spirko took a big dive into last week as well. I haven't heard it yet, but this is one of those articles that when you read it, the title jumps out at you. And this is one of those that the news loves to push because it is, well, it's scary. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's attention grabbing. And it's one of those that really catches your eye when you start reading it. But you're like, that can't be right. And let's dig in because this isn't nearly as cut and dry as we might think. And once again, it's the idea of climate change action under the guise of let's make the world better, blah, blah, blah. All right. A recent study analyzed the carbon footprint of urban agricultural sites in comparison to their more conventional agricultural counterparts. Now, here's the deal. Most folks, they read the headline, they share the article, and they move on. Right here, very first paragraph, second sentence. The study found that while 43% of urban farms have a smaller carbon footprint than conventional farms, so right there, half of all the farms, or 43%, you could basically call that half of all urban farms have a smaller carbon footprint than the big industrial ag. Okay, right there, that already takes a huge deflation in the wind on the sales of this article. So right there, you've already eliminated half of it. Okay, keep going, Tim. Food from the remaining 57% of urban farms and gardens leaves a significantly greater carbon footprint, up to 6 times greater than conventional farms. Okay, there has to be more to this story. Here we go. The researchers studied, this is only paragraph 2, folks. This isn't like bottom of the barrel. You know how they love to leave things to the end. The researchers studied environmental impacts of 3 kinds of urban farms: high production urban farms, volunteer-led community gardens, and individual gardens. Okay, so they looked at those 3. Cool. There's some things missing there, and if anybody else can catch what they're not talking about, throw it in the comments, but we're going to keep going. The primary contributor to environmental impact was here. Okay, so first off, 43% had a lower carbon footprint. All right, now here's the next kicker. This is where those 57% come in. The primary contributor to environmental impact was infrastructure on the sites. It was not the growing of the vegetables. It was the infrastructure. And if anybody didn't catch that, I'm going to say it a third time. Infrastructure. Here it is. The things that people build in order to enable food growing So that could be raised beds, pathways, or garden sheds. So again, we are dealing with an urban setting, and we're dealing with folks who want a pretty backyard. We're dealing with folks who would probably already have a gorgeous backyard to begin with. And so they're looking at all of these other inputs like, hey, I like that really nice poly shed that I bought from Costco. So we're going to include that in the carbon footprint of how you grow your vegetables. Are you seeing it here? All right. Pathways. So stones. You got to have pathways to walk to the garden. Well, you're going to have a pathway in the backyard either way. You're going to have a garden shed either way. Raised beds, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. We got some solutions here, but I want folks to realize that these scary headlines aren't always as true as they like to lead them to be. A couple of years ago, when there was that big story about how half of the grid was on the verge of collapse because of certain shutdowns, and it was a scary looking report. Well, it turned out they put that report out every single year, and guess what? It wasn't any different. It just caught traction that year. So the person who put the survey together said they also said there are lesser but still substantial negative environmental impacts from certain supplies such as compost and water irrigation. I'd have to dig into that more, but I'm not really sure how you take compost and water irrigation as negative environmental effects, but let's move on from that. If you look for examples of food products that are grown in relatively carbon-intensive ways in conventional settings, and you can actually grow these things in cities, then your net carbon impact is less. Okay, so what they're saying, look at things like tomatoes and asparagus, which they talk about, because those are things that either need to be grown in greenhouses or need to be flown in because they're highly perishable. According to the study, the findings of this research, ready? Here we go. We go to the, remember, go all the way to the bottom to find out that it's not nearly as scary as we think. The findings of this research do not mean that the benefits of urban agriculture should be downplayed. Hawes said urban farms can sometimes outperform conventional farms and positively impact the community. All right, let's leave it at that. Positively impact the community. Sure, great. That to me, neither here nor there. But I got a few thoughts on this. The first one, guys, is how in the world did carbon footprint become the benchmark by which all decisions need to be made? Literally, almost everything we talk about or we hear in the news now is, how is the carbon footprint? Where is the carbon footprint? It is the moral benchmark of all decisions. But here's the thing, it's also the moral benchmark that is the most flexible about anybody. You read comments on Instagram, Facebook, wherever it happens to be. Again, it's simply, I'm going to judge other people based on their carbon footprint, but mine is personally justified. It really, really bothers me. Okay. But here's the thing, this entire study, here's some things that I looked at that it doesn't take into account. This doesn't take into account how much healthier it is to grow your own food. Again, remember that that's a solution. Growing our own food is almost always healthier than buying shit from the industrial complex that I'm guilty of all the time. Simple as that. It also doesn't take into account the independence of having your own food. We all remember 2020 when a whole bunch of things just completely disappeared from the grocery store shelves. And all of a sudden they had to limit and ration and the whole works. Guess what? Having a more independent society is good for society as a whole. And it doesn't take into effect the cost savings of growing your own food. Maybe not right away, but down the road. Those are three things right there that, and I know it's a study based on the carbon footprint alone. The problem is that folks take this as the gospel and say, okay, well, I guess I shouldn't grow vegetables then because the Michigan Herald or whatever this newspaper is told me I shouldn't. How about this? Here's a thought. This is something that homesteaders and poor folk have been doing for years, but use recycled or upcycled materials. I wanted to build a chicken pen. So guess what I did? I went down, I walked the beach, and I found a whole bunch of driftwood that I could drive into the ground. I'm not seeing, wherever you stand on the idea of, using materials or not using materials, using recycled materials is better in so many ways. Again, what a great solution. Now, here's the next thing. This is urban gardening. This study, again, people don't see that. They just see the headline in their mind. Folks interpret this as growing your own vegetables is bad for the environment. Big corporate growing your vegetables is good for the environment. This does not take into account suburban gardening. It doesn't take in rural gardening. It doesn't take in homesteading gardening. So what can we do? Well, screw them. Don't worry about it. Grow your own garden. Save your own seeds. Use local and recycled materials. And finally, here's something that we joke about all the time. But this article, this study really did make me think. How about our input costs? Everybody's heard the story from some homesteader who said, hey, look at this tomato. This is my beautiful, very first tomato, and it only cost me $150 in input supplies, right? We joke about that. But you know what? That's something to think about. Maybe we could go get seeds from our local neighbors. Maybe we could learn how to start our own seedlings. Maybe we don't need that fancy ass raised bed garden that cost me $500, including pond liner and drainage. No, anyway, maybe we don't. I'm just saying, instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, maybe we can learn something from this article. Maybe we can say, maybe I shouldn't spend just as much. Maybe I could reuse materials. Anyway, it's a thought. These type of articles, they sell clicks. They get eyeballs, and I just don't want folks to read it and say, not that this is going to affect our community that much, but I wanted to come at it from a solutions-based premise here. So, all right, what do we got next? The next article of the week comes from the CBC, the Canadian Corporate News. Anyway, it's funded by our government. We'll deal with it. But this was close to home, or at least close to where I used to call home. And this was the massive storm, the massive snowstorm in Cape Breton mainly. And for those who don't know, Nova Scotia is on the east coast of Canada. I call it the Maine of Canada. And it's mostly a peninsula, except at the very top, there's a big island, and that's called Cape Breton. And they had a historic snowfall. I will try to convert as we go along here. But here's the story. And this is 4 days afterwards. Nova Scotia still digging out after historic snowfall drops 60 inches in some areas. Crazy. People in Nova Scotia were digging out Monday after a historic multi-day snowstorm slammed much of the province, with some residents of the hard-hit Cape Breton being told to shelter in place as crews struggled to clear snow-covered streets. Anytime we deal with a big weather phenomenon like that, shelter in place is used quite often. Now, the largest snowstorm I ever saw was in 2004. It was called White Juan. What a funny name, because we had a hurricane early in the year called Juan, but it was a nasty storm. That was 4 foot of snow with some drifts that were 10 or 12 feet high at times. But this one was even bigger than that. But it wasn't the entire province, at least not that bad. Here's another thought, or another thing that the government's saying. It could be days before some rural roads are cleared. The chief engineer, Nova Scotia chief engineer, told reporters the top priority is making sure the major series highways are cleared, followed by trunk highways, routes, and then local roads, and then gravel roads. I wanted to talk about that just a little bit. The process, of course. The further rural we live, the more self-sufficient we need to be, and the longer we need to expect to not have our roads cleared. I get it. Not the end of the world, right? It was said that a state of emergency doesn't mean snow clearing will happen faster. This government official said it means people can be fined for being outside unnecessarily. Again, something I didn't know. I didn't know in Canada that if they declared a state of emergency and you're outside for a non-emergency reason, they can fine you. And I'm sure put you in jail if they really want to. They said some equipment was having such a hard time getting through the heavy snow, some of the plows were actually getting stuck. I saw our grader here in town the other day. It tends to break down quite often. It wasn't stuck, but it wasn't working. And Transit Cape Breton will not be operating still a couple of days after the storm. There was some requests sent to the federal government for heavy equipment to assist with snow removal, possible fuel storage to help replenish equipment faster, and air transport to help with the delivery of supplies and possible evacuations. Again, all of these things sound scary, don't they? They reported up to 30 car accidents and many, every single time, many stranded motorists and abandoned vehicles. What is wrong with folks? I don't know. And for those of you on the audio, you won't be able to see this picture, but there is a dude literally shoveling off the roof of his one-story house. And the drift is up to somewhere between his waist and his shoulder. So we're talking 4 feet of snow on the roof of that house. Good thing snow load is an issue when building houses in Nova Scotia, but that's heart attack snow, folks. So be careful out there. So what do? You look at this and you think, what would happen if it happened to me? Well, it did happen to me in the past, and it could happen to most of us. Probably not Ellen down in Australia. I'm thinking she probably won't be dealing with 6 feet or 5 feet of snow, but here we are anyway. Have lots of food on hands, folks. We know this. This is one of those things that we preach, but this is something that I hope gets out to the general public. If you live in a rural area, you should have a bunch of food on hand anyway. But if you live somewhere where you can get shut down for a metric shit ton of time simply because Mother Nature decided to go a little cold, well, there you go. What do? We have food on hand, obviously, have prescriptions and have baby supplies. Our girls were on formula. We always made sure we had an extra couple of cans of formula because you just didn't know if Walmart or wherever you picked it up would be out of it. But more than that, what happens if you get 4 feet, 5 feet of snow dumped on you and you can't get to the store for a week? You got to figure out a way to feed your babies. You got to figure out a way to make sure your blood pressure stays down, and you got to eat. If you can't eat, you're in trouble. And if you're out there shoveling snow like a bugger, you're going to need more calories too, right? Have a plan. I saw some articles or some pictures on Reddit, actually, of folks that actually had to climb out of second-story windows to get out of their house. I saw a picture of a guy who rolled up his garage door, and there was about 3 inches of light at the very top. That is so overwhelming. It's scary. So have a plan. How can I get out of my home if the snow is, up to the eaves, right? What are you going to do? Here's another one. And I just did a review on the DeWalt battery-powered snowblower, but a tip that I have a really good story. One of kind of my adopted grandfathers, his name was Poe. He's long since passed away many years ago. One of my good friends, Alex, it was his grandfather. And we went over to his house to play Risk during White Wand. And I get over there and it is a blizzard out and Poe is out with the snowblower. And I looked at him and I said, "What is wrong with you?" And he goes, "If I don't do it now, by the time it totally gets dumped on, I ain't going to be able to do it." So in other words, stay on top of the snow. It sucks, but if you have a path or, think of it this way, even if you can just keep a 3-foot wide path open from you to the street, that could mean the difference between life and death. So if it's given 5 feet of snow and you got to go out every hour to clear a foot of snow with a snowblower or whatever, all the better for it. So stay on top of the snow if you can. Keep an eye on your vents and your chimneys, folks. This is one of those bad ones, but you can see there, his chimney in the background is okay, but I've seen lots of chimneys that get frosted or iced over, and that can cause, number one, it can shut your furnace off, and if it doesn't have proper safeguards in place, it could end up poisoning you, so you don't want that. And then, of course, stay the hell home. We did that episode a few months back on the LA riots, and every single person just about who died as a result of the riots would not have died if they'd have just done those 4 words: stay the hell home. Simple as that. All right, on to the next. This is the Stranger Than Fiction. This one is literally stranger than fiction. And if you haven't heard this, this might be one I haven't seen do the rounds yet, but here you go. This is an article from Newsweek, and it says map shows NATO territory losing GPS amid Russia electronic warfare drill. Didn't even know this existed, folks, but it's kind of interesting. And again, we're going to come at this from a solutions-based perspective. GPS disturbances were detected across NATO member Poland on Tuesday. They've sparked speculation of Russian involvement following a similar incident in the region last month. Over northern and central Poland, the GPS signal was again jammed, with Warsaw and a few other cities affected. And the Swedish Military Intelligence Agency is investigating at the moment. This is kind of cool for those, again, on the video feed, audio. We got a map here that shows where GPS was completely jammed. I didn't even know you could jam GPS, but here you go. Russians tested this electronic weapon in Kaliningrad, so almost half of Poland and the Suwalki corridor were left without GPS. GPS jamming was detected in eastern and southeastern parts of NATO's newest member, Finland. And here's the thing. They say, we don't know whether it was intentionally caused or a byproduct of the Russian activities. There you go. Simple as that. Here's the deal. It doesn't matter if it was intentional or it was a byproduct. Either way, GPS was jammed. So here's my thoughts. This reminded me again of about a year and a half ago coming back from the U.S. and Bell Canada shutting off my data because apparently I'd used too much or they didn't have the proper plan on there. And guess what? Like a good prepper, that was my only source of navigation. Yeah, I know, right? I felt like I was standing up in, 10th grade, getting ready to do a presentation, and I'd forgot to put clothes on. That's how naked I felt. I'm telling you, it was a horrible feeling. So, number one, know your routes. Travel them on occasion without GPS. Most folks will travel within their own city and never once look at landmarks or anything because they just listen to Google Maps or GPS. It's a really good, Becky and I do this now. Now that we've gone to the city, we go to Edmonton quite regularly. We will travel and try to use our brain. Sometimes it screws us up, but you know what? When you screw up, you get stressed out. That's when you make those new mental synapse connections and you realize, that's how I get there. So don't only be reliant on electronics for that kind of stuff, right? Also, if you do have working GPS, take a picture or a screenshot of your directions so that if you do lose data, you still have it. And of course, keep a paper atlas on hand. We stopped at a gas station in Tofield the other day, which is about 2 hours away from here. They had a ton of maps and there was a guy picking one up and I was like, that's kind of cool. So I now have a really nice spiral bound atlas down in, I kind of have this third layer of hidden compartments. It's not intentional. It was just put there in a RAM and it's underneath the center console. Perfect space for a spiral bound North American road atlas. So simple as that. Apparently. So yeah. Ellen Kerr says, so it's easy to jam GPS, low cost and causes havoc, and they're illegal though. Totally get it. But that's the crazy thing. Just because something's illegal doesn't mean people don't have it. But this is a massive electronic weapon that Russia's using. And apparently they've been using it to try to jam, GPS guided missiles and that sort of thing. So of course, we're always going to be dealing with the after effects of other countries' war efforts. So this is just one of them things. It could be very simple. It could be a solar flare. It could be a ton of things that end up putting the GPS out permanently or more likely temporarily. So again, just think about it. What are the things we can do to have redundancies? 2 is 1, 1 is none, and 3 is a guarantee, right? So 3 ways to get home. There you go. Simple as that. So that's the end of Stranger Than Fiction for this week. I hope I come at it with some more solutions for you and some interesting articles maybe you hadn't quite heard yet. All right, next, what do we got? Well, we got to talk about our first sponsor of the evening, and that is my good buddy Joel Riles. We're actually talking today. He had some generator problems, poor guy. And he has the Protection Dog podcast. He took a chance on our podcast here, and he's like, hey, I want to sponsor you. I want to do value for value exchange. So give him some listen if you're wanting to get motivated. It's called the Protection Dog podcast, but I tell you every single week, it's more than that. It's way more than dogs. It's about rebuilding your life from scratch. It's about being self-sufficient. It's about making all the money you can. It's about building your empire. And it's about doing the shit even when you don't feel like doing the shit. So there you go. Don't forget my good buddy Joel Riles at the Protection Dog podcast. All right, next we have the Side Hustle Spotlight. This is a good one. This is a little bit different, but I wanted to share it with you because I liked it. Yet another Alberta story. This one came out this week from Global News, and it was the Edmonton Junk Removal Company launches a free cycle furniture program. Now, here's the deal. This in and of itself isn't necessarily a side hustle or an entrepreneurial venture, but there's some lessons we can pull out of it, and I really like this one. So, Edmonton Junk Removal Company launches free cycle furniture program. During business hours, Just Junk is a full-service item removal company. But on Monday nights, it recycles some of those furniture pieces and offers them to people in need. So this reminds me, back in my college days, I think it was NBTel at the time, New Brunswick Telecom. They used to have this place where all these nerdy old dudes would get together and they would take all of these donated computers and they would put them back together and make workable computers for low-income families. This is similar, but there's some, like I said, entrepreneurial lessons to be learned. In the past, the company had donated the salvaged furniture to organizations like Habitat for Humanity. But with inflation going up and people having a hard time, we just figured we'd donate our furniture and we'd receive from our customers on a weekly basis. So every Monday night from 6:30 to 8:30, they open their doors. Folks can take as much or as little as they want. He said the program also saves household items from the landfill. So what do I like about this? Well, there's a few thoughts here, but the big one is, number one, some of these things might be slightly broken. So if you take them, you might need to know how to fix them. What a great skill, being a handyman as a prepper. I love that. Okay, but we're talking about entrepreneurial things. And here's the thing. A skill of entrepreneurs is to see the need and to find a way to make money. But there's a second one that we don't always talk about so much, and that is to also figure out ways to not spend as much money. So if you're spending less money or you're making more money, they're both improving the bottom line, right? Now, what do I like about this? They look at this and they say, hey, we have this junk. We're already getting paid to haul it away. And we probably have to pay massive amounts of money to take it to the landfill. And there's people who could probably use it. So guess what? We can divert it from the landfill. We can save the disposal fees, and we can give it to other folks who could use it. There's lots of places that are doing this, but this is the same concept that I think about every time I go to my local landfill. And I think, all right, here's the deal. I look, they have this great big massive burn pile that if somebody wanted to go through it and pick out all the firewood in there, they could sell it or heat their house for a month of Sundays. It would be awesome. Tons of redeemable bottles go to the landfill. If they wanted to let some, poor folk or a kid, maybe not a kid, but a teenager go through and collect them, why not? You're going to divert them, right? The copper that goes into the scrap, all these things. So there's always ways to look at what you're doing and say, how can I make more money? Or how can I save more money? And they're both really important. And Cold War Prepper says timing in that is also critical. And I'm going to guess he's talking about giving away this kind of stuff because this is a problem. And this is what I ran into when we used to tear apart or clean up abandoned bank properties. I used to save everything. And then I would put it in a storage container and I would say, you know what? I'm going to give that to somebody. And guess what would happen? I'd never find somebody to give it to. So what I would probably say is, I'm guessing that come Tuesday after they've done the giveaway, whatever's left probably still goes to the landfill. But it's one more step to get rid of a bunch of shit so that you don't have to pay to do it. I like that. All right. Next thing we have is Workshop Wasteland. And this is where we take a look at post-apocalyptic and dystopian popular culture, movies, music, books, whatever. So this one's a real quick one. We're not going to spend any time on it at all. If you've played The Last of Us, which I really enjoyed, haven't played The Last of Us 2, but Neil Druckmann teases a concept for Last of Us Part 3. It was a documentary on the making of The Last of Us Part 2, and he said there's probably one more chapter to this story. He has a concept, and that's all there is to it. There's no more I can tell you about it. But if anybody's out there and they are a Last of Us fan, it sounds like there's a good chance they might get a Part 3 eventually. Now, this one I ran across, this is just a new video game. We're not going to talk about it long because I'm not a huge video gamer, but there are folks out there that are. And this is a game on Steam called New Cycle, not News Cycle, but New Cycle. And here is the blurb. New Cycle is a city building game with focus on survival. After an apocalyptic series of solar flares, human society has been thrown into disarray. Establish a settlement and develop it all the way from humble beginnings to industrial metropolis. All I wanted to share was if folks are into like the Age of Empires world building game, this is a kind of steampunk post-apocalyptic version of that. So if there's folks out there that are like, hey, I'd like to test my world building skills, this might be something to check out. All right. Now, the big part of this week in Workshop Wasteland is The Mist. How many of you or if anybody out there has ever seen it, it is definitely one of my favorites. It definitely falls under the apocalyptic movie framework. And Becky and I sat down and rewatched it a little while ago. And so what I'm going to do in this segment is if I watch new movies, I'm going to give you a 2 or 3 minute review of them. But if I watch classics, I'm going to do the exact same thing because this is one of the best apocalyptic films ever made. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor when you have a time. a time. When you have a time, I sound like an Italian it's a Mario. When you have a time, then you should probably, well, no, anyway, give yourself some enjoyment and sit down and watch it sometime. But all right, so my thoughts on The Mist and why it is literally a classic apocalyptic film. Number one, this thing gets going fast. There's maybe 3 minutes of buildup of an early storm, and then boom, you get right into the action. You might not know what the action is, but it happens real quick. No power, no radio, no cell phone, no payphone. What? Everything gets blown out, almost like an EMP. It's not an EMP, but real quick, you realize shit's gone sideways. And I like that. You got power trucks going, you got the military, you got fire and police. You find out that leave for the military base has all been canceled, and there's this really creepy Silent Hill type siren. You know things aren't good. This film has probably one of the most perfect scripts. There's very few words that are wasted, and the way it's set up through 3 acts, and we're going to talk a bit more about it, it just has one of the tightest, most enjoyable scripts. I love seeing classics done like this. I'm a huge fan of confined space films. If you haven't heard me talk about this in the past, I love movies like Pontypool, where the entire thing takes place within a radio studio and you're hearing about the apocalypse happening in the background. There's something claustrophobic and intimidating and anxiety inducing in these closed kind of confines. So for some reason, we now have a completely different movie playing up there. That's great. So, all right. The ending, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the ending is as bleak as any movie I've ever seen. Frank Darabont, who also did a couple other Stephen King classics and wrote the first season of The Walking Dead, actually rewrote the ending to The Mist, and Stephen King patted him on the back and said, man, I wish I'd have thought of that. Sound design, or lack of sound, is incredibly creepy in The Mist. They do the old, hearing things instead of seeing things, and it's super impactful. Also, the tempo of the film is great. You get these long, quiet sections, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose with action. And it must be similar to being a police officer driving around, 8 hours of the day, nothing happens, and all of a sudden there's a high-speed police chase. It's that kind of thing. It's got a 1950s monster movie vibe to it, and I love it. The acting is over the top on purpose because it is dealing with or trying to pay homage to the old 1950s monster films. There's actually a black and white version that was released, I believe, in theaters on the 10th anniversary. I haven't seen it, but I think this movie would really, really be done well in black and white. What I really like more than anything is the psychological and the sociological themes of this movie. They really quickly, the folks in there kind of devolve into 3 groups. You've got your realists, your rationalists, and your religious. And it doesn't take any time at all to see how quick society would collapse and how quick they would reform into these little cadres of folks. I love it. There's a great quote in the movie that sums up the entire theme of the film. And it says, sure, as long as the machines are working and you can dial 911, but you take those things away, you throw people into the dark, you scare the shit out of them, no more rules, and you'll quickly see how primitive people can become. Yep, I'm a big fan of the unknown. And in my limited experience with films, when you don't see the monster, it's more scary than when you do. Now, the downside, I'm going to say the CGI looks terrible on purpose. It looked dated when it came out, but that is one notch down for sure. And where the film falters a bit is in the showing of the thing. So you will see all of these crazy creatures and stuff. I don't think it was necessarily needed. I think the film could have been done really well with almost never showing any of the monsters. But there you go. I had a note here. I'm going to leave that out because I don't want to spoil the ending. But Hitchcock, here's 2 quotes from Hitchcock that I love. He says, suspense is like a woman. The more left to the imagination, the more the excitement. And then he said, there is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it. That is one of my favorite quotes of all time. In other words, the monster you don't see is scarier than the monster you do. I give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It would be a perfect film if it showed the monsters less and the CGI didn't suck donkey balls. Other than that, it's a perfect apocalyptic film. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor. Make yourself an old-fashioned, sit down on a snowy Saturday night and watch The Mist. Just be prepared to be slightly broken in your spirit because that ending is a gut punch, folks. All right, moving right along to one of my most favorite titled segments of the week, and that is I Read It on the Internet. So this is where I go to our preppers on reddit.com. And if you haven't been there, we've talked about it. And I pick the most interesting article or the highest trending post of the week. This is a good one. This is by user Simple Witch. And the question was posed, why do you guys have kids? I have so many friends trying to have kids or kids on the way. With everything that is going on, I don't understand why anyone would want to have kids right now. I know it's not reasonable to live in fear. My heart tells me it's okay to have kids. Maybe nothing will happen, but my brain tells me it's the worst idea ever. There's this lingering threat of war, terrible climate change, and so on. With a lot of luck, maybe we won't be affected by anything major in our lifetime, but our kids will be 100%, won't they? I feel like it's so irresponsible to make kids just so they'll suffer in a few years. Maybe I'm wrong. I just can't imagine actively trying to have kids and never think about the future and what scientists and experts say. Well, anyway, my mom told me I'm selfish for not having kids anyway, so we'll get into that. But I just wanted to share that is a common thread amongst preppers and non-preppers alike, and especially the older Gen Z generation. As they get older, a lot of them don't want to have kids because they have been spoon-fed an entire diet of fear since the day they were born. And damn it, it's sad. It makes me sad. Couple of edits here. They said, I'm not from the U.S. I live near Ukraine where there's a special operation going on right now. We've had bombing last year just 200 kilometers away from my home. So many of you, anyway, that sucks. This breaks my heart because I love my kids. We've got 5 kids. As I was putting this article together, Alice actually messaged me and I seen it and she's like, Dad, and I'm like, oh, she needs me to run her something. She wanted me to run her water bottles over to basketball. And as much as for an instant, I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to do that. I think, nah, that's why I had kids and I friggin' love them and they crack me up and there's so many reasons. But this is an interesting so I wanted to share 3 or 4 comments from the Reddit community on their thoughts of why they have kids. And then I'll share my thoughts on why Becky and I had kids. We're preppers, not doomers. If you haven't heard the term doomer, that is a late 80s, early 90s where folks went around, Chicken Little, the world's going to end, right? So they said, we're preppers, not doomers. What are you even trying to survive for? Good point. How about this one? The shit has hit the fan numerous times throughout our history. Empires rise, empires fall. Plagues kill millions. Natural disasters destroy entire cities. Whole civilizations have come and gone. Most of what we call preparedness now is simply a base way humans have survived. After every disaster, people crawl from the rubble and life goes on. We live in a unique time where the norm doesn't partake in subsistence farming, hunting, or anything like that. It's finally this one here. We prep because of things like this. I couldn't give a shit about myself. I mostly prep for my family, having kids and giving them a good life. Why do we prep? Why do we have kids as preppers? Not everybody does. And if you don't want to have kids, I'm not going to judge you. I'm an anarchist. Do whatever you want. As long as you don't steal my shit or hurt me, I'm cool. But it made me think, why did I have kids? Why did Becky and I have kids? Well, one is because I want a legacy. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but, there is an innate Darwinian instinct within, I think, most folks that part of the reason we're on this planet is to further our DNA. And simple as that. It's not here nor there. Because I believe this world is worth inhabiting. We live in an incredible world that is worth taking care of. And I think by choosing not to have kids, we're choosing not to inhabit this planet. And for me, I want my kids to have the future because there will be a future. No matter what people think, there will always be a future. And I hate when people think there isn't. And I don't want people to think that because good shit, bad shit. There was that quote that I love from C.S. Lewis that everybody was quoting during COVID. And he was asked by a student, how can I do anything? I'm paralyzed with fear, with the fact that we could be annihilated tomorrow from a nuclear weapon. How could I do anything? And he looked at them and he said, listen, don't you think that folks who lived near the Vikings were constantly in fear of being annihilated by a Viking ship showing up, or by the Black Plague or the Black Death? But folks still had babies, because that's what we do. This is our legacy. One of the biggest reasons we prep is so that these skills can be handed on to the next generation. And if we don't procreate and don't have a next generation, why prep, right? Because why did I have kids? Because I have the desire to love. And you don't have to have kids to love. I get it. But there is something incredibly special about having kids, and about seeing them succeed, and about getting to live life a second time. Because first you go through high school, and then you get to help your kids go through high school. You get to watch movies with your kids for the first time that it's like watching them again for the first time. And there is nothing, anyway, the desire to love your kids is innate. And it is something that until you experience it is indescribable. And because I want to have my kids around, and hopefully grandkids if they decide to, when I'm old, because I don't want to be lonely. I want to have, I want my kids to come by once a week and take me out for coffee and push me in my wheelchair. Maybe that's selfish. I don't know. But I want my kids to inherit this world. I want my kids to be happy. I want to impart in them all the skills that I have spent all these years learning. And I want them to impart those skills in their kids. Oh, hop down off the soapbox, Tim. So there you go. I love my kids. I think they're incredible. I may not be a perfect father some days, but you know what? I damn well try the best I can. And I want their generation to know that it's okay to have kids too, because that is simply where this world exists. And there will always be bad shit. And I don't want that entire generation to sit around and be scared shitless because they've been spoon-fed a diet of climate hysteria, and it frustrates me to no end. Whew. Next sponsor. Yeah. Anyway, my good friend John Willis sent me this shirt the other day. Do not comply. Special operations equipment. The dude is incredible. He makes incredible gear, but I simply want to thank him. Every time I get a shirt, I'm going to give him a shout out because I don't deserve it. He sends them to me. The dude is an inspiration. He has helped me along the way. And if you're looking for cool tactical gear or just cool shirts, give him a go, guys. All right, what's next? We have the cookbook of the collapse. So again, number one, I want to reach out to you guys and say, hey, if you have simple family recipes or whatever that would allow you to use your preps, send them to me. I want to make a workshop cookbook called the Cookbook of the Collapse. When we get to 100, we're going to put them together. Today's episode. What are you, Tim? What is this, like Saturday morning cartoons? Anyway, today's recipe comes again from Jim Tubbs. He sent one last week, and this one goes along with it. He comes from Sawhorse Stables Woodcraft, and this one is a simple recipe for sausage gravy. Oh, the bane of my existence. I do love it, though. 1 pound ground breakfast sausage, 4 cups whole milk. You can use 2% if you want. 1/3 cup all-purpose flour, salt and pepper to taste. Oh, man. Brown the sausage in a large skillet. He prefers to use cast iron. Until cooked, do not drain. Leave the good fat in there. Lower heat to low. Sprinkle flour over cooked sausage. Mix the flour into the sausage. Heat on low until flour is cooked. Add half the milk. Increase the heat, stirring consistently. Add the remainder of the milk. Stir until your desired thickness. Add salt and pepper to taste, and then serve over biscuits or hash browns. That almost sounds sad to put them on hash browns. They got to go on biscuits, right? But what a great simple recipe. I had never had biscuits and gravy before I went to the U.S., and I friggin' love them. They're not available in Canada for anybody who's wondering. It's just not a Canadian thing. So if you're looking for it, there's the recipe. I'm not sure if it made it into the show notes tonight, but I will make sure it gets into the show notes. All the articles are, but I don't think I put the recipe in there for you. All right, what's next? This week in the workshop. This is something I used to do on my Saturday shows, and we've moved it into this week in prepping. And it's, again, where I share with you the things that I've gotten done so that you guys keep me accountable. And hopefully maybe I inspire you to try some new things as well. But First thing I did early this week, was demolish the bathroom in the rental that I'm renovating. And what a stench, folks. Remember to wear gloves, because also don't use particle board around a toilet. Yeah, enough said. It was disgusting. We had a furnace motor seize on a rental this week. Got that fixed. That turns out to be what caused the frozen pipes. Heat was on, but it wasn't circulating. So the house wasn't getting really cold, but in that cold snap, it wasn't pushing it around because the blower couldn't engage. Isn't that something? Yeah. Went away last weekend for the badminton. Nope, that was you, Tim, when you were a kid. Stop living vicariously through your kids. Volleyball. Charlotte did a volleyball tournament. 60 teams. They tied for, I can't remember if it was 17th or 23rd. Doesn't matter, but it was above. They were in the top half. Had a hell of a time. It was just, yeah, that's where the kids make their memories. So if your kids want to do sports and you can afford it and you can make it happen, it's a hell of a good time every so often. But it was a nasty drive home. We had a nasty snowstorm and ice everywhere. Made it home fine. Just drive like, not like a maniac. I got to do my first real test of the DeWalt snowblower. And if you caught it, I did a review video this week. I liked it. It's a steep price tag, but for the folks it's made for, it really works. I spent a day assembling daycare furniture. Yep, once again, daycare furniture. And one tool in there that's been indispensable to me is a small package of impact driver Allen keys. They fit into my impact driver, and they have all the different Allen key sizes. That has been a lifesaver for me. We're still dealing with the electricians at the new daycare, in case anybody wants an update on that. We should have been open by now, but they just don't care. It doesn't matter how much you holler or carry on. Quick little anecdote, but they need to run wiring through the entire building. There is a piano teacher in the basement who has a grand piano that costs more than most people's houses. They told the electricians 3 times, make sure you cover it, you keep it clean. Yep, no problem. But if you've ever seen the old meme, and I'm not slamming electricians, but every electrician I've ever met has been filthy. They're scared of brooms, and this was no different. They got dirt and stuff all over. I don't know what ever possessed them to do it, but this is what we're dealing with. The sooner they can get this fire system installed, the happier we will all be. Had a situation with a tenant this week. They were new, and the owners didn't get the rent when they were supposed to, and a whole bunch of things happened. And I want to tell you guys something. If and when you ever get into property management, 2 things. Be prompt when you're going after somebody like that. Don't let them get behind. And number 2, make sure you put out your expectations where they're supposed to be. It turned out that it was an electronic transfer error. They sent it to the wrong email address, and it got lost in limbo, and they brought me cash, and I deposited it and transferred it for them. But don't let things fester. Deal with it right away, because if you don't, problems can happen. Just before, about lunchtime today, the Amazon driver got stuck in my driveway, and we got to use that folding shovel I got at Costco last year for the very first time. We got him out. Guys, if you're driving in winter conditions, have good tires on your vehicle. He had this great big van, and those tires they looked like summer tires. They were awful. If you happen to notice this week, we thank you to Letty Lou, who revamped the logos and the names in the Toolman Tim's Workshop Telegram groups. I think there's 5 at least we have, and folks were constantly posting in the wrong group because they clicked on it quick. So hopefully this makes it a little more streamlined. I heard so many complaints from the community that I had to act. Anyway, I really appreciate when folks from the community volunteer their time, because some of this little stuff is the things that I don't always have time to do right away. So thank you, Letty Lou, for that. It was great. What do we have this week for a video? Well, we had the 7th edition of Delinquents Gully Chronicles. And of course, we had the new review video for the DeWalt snowblower, which I loved. And next Friday will be the next edition of the Post-Apocalyptic Book Club. I believe this will be the 4th segment of 3 chapters in Ayn Rand's. Atlas Shrugged. We've been reading through that for those who don't know. And it's been a good time. So join us. If you want to be part of it, you can chat along through the Telegram group. You can chat along through the YouTube channel, or I will give you the link and you can come on and talk with us live. All right. What do we got next? Let's move on to the Creator Spotlight. This is a good one. I like this one. And right here. So each week I share with you guys somebody or some creator that I've been digging recently and I think would be a good asset to the prepping community. So I've been doing some, actually, in the last segment, I forgot to mention, I tried my melting furnace for the first time the other night. Failed miserably, but it's a learning experience. So I've been doing a lot of precious metals watching on YouTube. And this dude here, Silver Dragons, I don't know why he only has 196,000 subs, because his stuff is awesome. But what do I really like are his channels, his videos right here. So this one, for instance, Bullion Dealer reveals worst silver to stack. His videos aren't clickbait, but what he does is he has a local coin shop, bullion dealer, where he goes in and he interviews them. They're about 20-minute videos at a time, and they do deep dives into silver and gold and precious, all of it. It's awesome. I have learned more from these videos in the last week or two than I've learned in my entire life about precious metals. So check him out. It's Silver Dragons on YouTube. His video link is in the description tonight, and awesome. I love it. Been one of the best. All right. Next is Must Be Nice. And this is one I don't always have on here, but the idea behind it, for those who are new to the community, Must Be Nice came out of my presentation last year, and it is one of it's one of our favorite sayings around here. And the idea is it's a way to pat each other on the back when you're building the life you want to live. And so I found this article. The title doesn't do it justice, but this young guy on TikTok, he bought a $24,000 home on Amazon. I didn't realize you could buy houses on Amazon, but I wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you here. So basically, it's a fold up. It comes in a container. It folds out. It's beautiful. It's way better than tiny houses, way better than mobile homes. It took 5 guys 25 minutes to assemble it. And he said here, opening up about his questionable purchase, the 23-year-old begged his followers to take his card away after dropping a staggering $24,000 on the home. I don't think there's anything staggering about this. So this article took this story and tried to turn it into a negative, whereas I watched this entire 3 or 4 minute TikTok of this kid, and he was pretty happy with his purchase. He said but he has to keep his house in storage for a bit because he bought the house without having land to put it on. And I got to say, a 23-year-old who is able to buy a $24,000 modular home, I think it's great. So here's my thoughts, guys. Another thing. So 2 things. You've got this younger generation who's saying, why are you having kids? And the other one is, we'll never be able to afford to buy a house. Well, guess what? You got to get friggin' creative. So this guy got creative. There was a family back in my hometown. I worked with their daughter at Dairy Queen many years ago. They told the story that they didn't have the money to build an entire house. So they built a basement and put a floor on top of it. They lived in their basement for like 8 years before they could afford to build an entire house. They figured it out. And then the first thing people say is, well, guess what? You can't build a basement and live in it anymore. Well, you might be true, but you know what you can do? You might be able to save up and buy yourself a $24,000 modular home, keep it in storage until you can figure things out, and then you can put it on land. I know, what a novel concept, right? But I love it. Thinking outside the box. I love seeing this Gen Z buy a house and he's like, hey, I don't have land to put it on yet. That doesn't matter. I'm buying it and I'm going to figure it out. Right now he's paying $150 a month for storage fees. Big friggin' deal. But here's the thing. These houses are kind of cool. They let you be mobile. You can set them up you can just put them wherever you want. And then if you're tired of where you are, fold it down, take off, and you're all good. I love it. Absolutely love it. It's making home ownership affordable for the young people who are having trouble thinking they could ever even buy a house. Crazy, isn't it? I love it. I love seeing these kids. I have this huge optimism for Generation Z, and I'm just going to leave it there. I know like I said, they've been given a whole bunch of bullshit over their lives, but they're doing it. This kid's doing it. And then I also think these foldable houses from Amazon could be really cool second property options. Or say you've got people that are going to be staying on your property long term, it would be a really good bug out / cabin for your family. So yeah, love it. All right, I want to pop back into the delinquents community. What do we got here? We got a couple different comments, and then we're going to dump into the community nail bag. I see Chase Peoples in here. That's Chuck's son. Good to see you. And he said, hey, Tim, just found out you're coming to the Kentucky Sustainable Living Festival. Shh, it's still a secret. But yes, I'm absolutely going to be at the Kentucky Sustainable Living Festival. And I can't wait to see everybody there. It's going to be great. That's coming up quick. It's toward the end of March, but I'll have more details here right away. And Bonnie Blue, 2A, always love seeing you in here. Said, great show tonight. Thanks, Tim. Anytime. That's what I'm here for. All right. And the final segment of the evening, and it's a big one. It's a full one. The community nail bag. It's got about 50 pounds of nails in it. Now, we got a lot of good mail this week. So we got, I've been getting comments even over on the Rumble feed now, which is awesome. This one come from Ice-T for last week's episode. And they said, hey, the dealer that the commenter was talking about is Manfra, Tordella, and Brooks. They're in the New York City, New Jersey area. They're the only dealer in the United States for Pamp Swiss. And we talked about Pamp Swiss last week, and they're the ones that have the certified silver from their bullion dealer. Anyway, it's really neat. And they said there's a substantial minimum and tax involved, but they're the only option for new gold bars from Pamp Swiss, which is the most reputable for bars. If you buy coins, make sure you buy them directly from the mint. There are horror stories about people putting tungsten and other such materials into bars, but coins can be counterfeited as well. Also, remember that people selling counterfeit may not even know they're counterfeit. 100% there. I liked hearing that. Another thing to consider is that you're not going to have to pay for groceries with a bar of gold. It's too valuable. Junk silver is probably the way to go. Junk silver are silver coins that were minted before 1965-64, and they're quarters, dimes, etc., that have been taken out of circulation that have actual silver in them. 100%. I'm actually bringing some Canadian junk silver to all the events to trade and sell, because I need to have more stuff to physically sell at the event. So I'm quite excited about that, but I agree completely. Junk silver is a great one. And Optimum 3, this was also over on Rumble, said, this was talking about again last week, fire safe or tamper resistant safe. This one here said, why don't you take a fireproof storage box and put it inside of a tamper resistant or a break-in resistant safe? Like that idea. All right, what do we got next here? This one was a good one. There's going to be some spoilers in here, but if you guys know, we do the Post-Apocalyptic Book Club. This one was for William Forstchen's book, 5 Years Later, and this was from a Jeremiah who watched the live stream from 4 or 5 months ago, and I wanted to share this. They said, thanks for the review. I just read this 1 month or so back, and I really did enjoy it, but I also felt it was a bit uneven, but it didn't ruin the story. All right, spoilers ahead. If you haven't watched it or if you're worried about spoilers, you can turn it off now because we're almost done for the evening. But they said, I didn't feel it ruined the story. Regarding the end with the bombs, I don't think that it takes away from John as a hero. He made the hard decision to take out the true villains, though it meant collateral damage. He was concerned about the damage, but it was unavoidable to rid the world of the unhinged villain. I'm fair with that. And I think you're right about the reality that John doesn't hide that he had something to do with it. He's willing to own the decision and have his name attached to it. I really, really like that. I'm just going to shout out to Yozik. He just popped in for a second. He is an indispensable member of the workshop delinquent community, and he's well past his bedtime, but he stopped in to say hello. Good to see you, brother. All right. Next comes from No One But 24. Not sure what that is. That was on YouTube. And I like hearing these stories. This is a prepper, a moment for someone who is prepared to pat themselves on the back. They said, hey, after a 4-day power outage last year, I set my house up to backfeed. And this was on one of my backfeeding videos. 4 days in the middle of winter was the last straw for me. I have my inlet box in my garage, separate building from the house. I like it in the garage because it's out of the weather and it's chained to my Harley. Only problem with the setup is I cannot use an interlock. And for those who don't know, it's one of those things that only allow you to turn on one breaker or the other. They said if I wanted to, I'd have to dig another trench and put in another line. but I have reminders on the inlet box that says make sure main breaker is off, and one right next to the generator. I also put a battery backup on my generator door. Sorry, on my garage door. This is the big part I really liked, and I wanted to share this because this is a great tip that most of us don't think about. I also put a battery backup on my garage door because I don't have an entry door, just a big door, and this way I can get access to my garage door even when the power's out, and the lights will come on so I can see what I'm doing in the dark. And he also installed a power return alarm. I love it. I also wanted to say thanks. I've gotten a bunch of emails this week, so anytime you want to send me feedback, whether it's through, Cookbook of the Claps, or you got interesting articles that folks send me all the time, you can send them at therealtimcook@gmail.com, or if you go to toolmantim.co, and right there on the front page, there should be a communication form. That seems to be the way most people like sending me things, and it's great because my spam filter doesn't delete it. So there you go. So this was cool, and I wanted to show. I haven't actually responded to this email yet, but I wanted to show it out to them because I just got it, I think, today. Then this says, hey, Tim, my husband, Joker Lees, and if you guys have seen Joker Lees in here before, and I have enjoyed several of your live streams. We found your content to be thought-provoking and informative, and I thank you for taking the time to read this in advance. Said my brother, their Instagram is @crazyrv, has a business that I feel might be something your viewers would be interested in. Said, I think a lot of people are worrying about physical security, but they don't pay attention much or out of touch on how the new thieves are breaching through technology. Said, I encourage you to check out his website. So the dude's website, and I wouldn't just plug this randomly, but I went onto his website and he has some really cool courses on there. And it's called learnonlinesecurity.com. What a great website domain that they own. I loved it. Anyway, check him out. There's some free stuff. He has a blog on there talking about a whole bunch of online security issues. Definitely worth checking out. So I wanted to say thanks to Mrs. Jokerlees for taking the time to send me an email. I also got some great emails from a locksmith today. Still conversing with him, but I'm going to share what he shared with me in next week's episode. All right. This one came from TikTok. This was from Halloween Bloodbath. And if you remember back to last week, we had the article on a senator in the U.S. proposing that anytime their honor was impinged, they would do a duel. I challenge you, sir, to a duel. Anyway, Halloween Bloodbath agrees, and they said, I think all world leaders should have to do this. It would prevent wars and no stand-ins. Love it. And I wanted to close with this. You guys know a good buddy of the community, a good buddy of mine, Sean Mills, from formerly Hack My Solar, and it's now Hack My Homestead. Well, he stitched one of my videos, and it meant a lot to me this week, and I wanted to share it. So if you're on TikTok, make sure TikTok or YouTube or any of the places, make sure you follow him, because for those who don't know, as soon as the show's over, I put this show into a program called Opus.Pro, and it's an AI program that will help pull out the best 60-second shorts for sharing across social media. And it's a great way to get This Week in Prepping Workshop Radio out to the masses. And Sean got this one little clip from me, and it was a good reminder for me this week to be solutions-based. So check this video out, and I'll be right back with you here. FBI director warns Chinese hackers aim to wreak havoc on U.S. critical infrastructure.
All the more reason to not be plugged into the U.S. critical infrastructure. Have some solar panels. How about collect some rainwater? Process your own firewood. Long-term food storage. Short-term food storage. Alternative methods of food preparation. And guess what? If nothing bad happens, you'll end up more resilient and you'll have more freedom in your life.
FBI director warns Chinese hackers. How great is that, folks? What a great reminder from a member of our community and a fellow content creator that no matter how scary some of this stranger than fiction news stories can be, we need to focus on the solutions. And I wanted to close with that because what a great reminder. I loved when he was chopping firewood. They say, firewood is the only heating source that will warm you twice. Once when you chop it, and the second time when you burn it. How great is it? He had a little rocket mass stove or a rocket heater there. All of that. Store And the beauty of all of these solutions, storing rainwater, long-term, short-term food storage, is this. It makes our life better. It makes us more resilient. Whether an environmental crisis happens, a storm of epic proportions, the gods decide it's going to be the coldest winter ever, any of these things we do makes our life better, whether it happens or it doesn't. So remember that. Take it out into the world. Remember that this week. Look at things through a solutions mindset. And remember, if a problem comes up, what did I say? The first time you have to deal with a problem is always the hardest. But remind yourself, I've been there. I've done this. I can do it again. Now go out, make the world your bitch, build your empire, and as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.